On a clear evening at the Westford Observatory, Dr. Jack Morgan adjusted the lenses of the massive telescope, his gaze fixed on the starry expanse above. Beside him, his colleague and fellow astrophysicist, Dr. Alan Grant, was absorbed in data on the screen, the glow casting sharp shadows on his focused face. "Anything yet?" Jack asked, his voice tinged with a mix of anticipation and weariness. "Nothing out of the ordinary," Alan replied, scrolling through the readings. "It's quiet tonight, too quiet for my liking." Just as Alan finished his sentence, the equipment began to whir and beep unusually, breaking the monotony of the night's silence. Both men perked up, their attention shifting to the console as numbers and graphs surged with sudden, unexplained activity. "Jack, you might want to see this," Alan said, stepping aside so Jack could view the monitor. "What in the world?" Jack muttered, observing the data spike. "That's no ordinary signal. It's off the charts. Are we picking up solar flares?" Alan shook his head. "No, it's coming from much farther away. This isn't any cosmic phenomenon we've cataloged before." As they debated the origin of the signal, a bright light erupted in the sky outside. It wasn't like any shooting star or satellite. It was larger, brighter, and stationary. Grabbing binoculars, Jack rushed to the observatory's dome, swinging it open to get a clearer view. Alan was right behind him, his curiosity overcoming his initial skepticism. Through the binoculars, Jack could see it wasn't just a light, but a structure, massive and shimmering, hanging silently in the Earth's orbit. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, geometric, yet seemingly alive, pulsating with a strange glow. "Alan, call the director, and then patch through to NASA now." Jack's voice was urgent, commanding. Alan rushed back inside, barking orders into the phone while Jack continued to observe the structure. The observatory was soon bustling with activity as more staff arrived, drawn by the commotion. By dawn, the observatory had become a makeshift command center. Government officials mingled with scientists, all trying to make sense of the visitor. Jack found himself briefing a group of military personnel, his usual reserve replaced by a tense excitement. "As far as we can tell, it's not hostile. It hasn't made any moves since it appeared," Jack explained, pointing at the live feed from their telescopes projected on the wall. A gruff general, who introduced himself as General Hargrove, stepped forward, scrutinizing the image. "And you're sure this isn't some Russian or Chinese space project?" "Absolutely sure, General. No nation on Earth has the capability to build something of this scale, let alone keep it hidden," Jack responded confidently. The room buzzed with theories and plans, everyone aware that the world had changed overnight. Amidst the chaos, Jack felt a hand on his shoulder. Turning, he saw Dr. Emily Harris, a linguist and communication expert who had been brought in by the government. "Dr. Morgan, I'm Emily Harris. I've been tasked with helping establish communication with whatever's out there. They think whatever sent that signal might be trying to communicate," she said, her voice both calm and authoritative. Jack nodded, feeling a surge of adrenaline at the possibility of first contact. "We need to understand their intentions, and quickly." "Exactly my thought," Emily agreed. "I'll need all the data we have on the signal, everything that led up to this." Together, they returned to the control room, where Alan had just finished setting up a new, more powerful signal analysis tool. "We're ready to start the transmission tests," he announced, looking between Emily and Jack. The three of them, along with a team of specialists, spent the next hours crafting a series of messages, ranging from mathematical sequences to basic greetings in multiple languages. As night fell again, they transmitted the first message. The response came quicker than anyone expected. The structure began to pulse rhythmically, a pattern that Emily swiftly recognized as a direct response. "It's acknowledging us," she whispered, awe and a hint of fear in her voice. Jack watched the screen, a mix of emotions running through him: hope, fear, and an overwhelming curiosity. Humanity was not alone, and somehow he was at the forefront of this monumental discovery. He glanced around at his team, at the faces filled with anticipation and anxiety, knowing whatever came next, they would face it together. The following morning, the atmosphere inside Westford Observatory was charged with a cautious optimism as Dr. Jack Morgan and his team prepared for what could be the most significant event in human history. Dr. Emily Harris stood beside him, examining the latest set of responses from the alien structure, each message progressively complex. "We're establishing a pattern of communication, but it's not like anything we've ever seen," Emily noted, pointing to the series of geometric shapes displayed on her screen. "It's almost like they're using a universal language based on mathematics and visual patterns." Jack nodded, his mind racing. Let's keep the dialogue going. We need to show that we're intelligent and willing to learn. As they transmitted another message, a sudden shift occurred in the alien structure. It began to emit a low, harmonic tone, and a section of it slowly morphed, opening to reveal a hollow interior. A beam of soft, blue light shot down towards Earth, landing a few hundred meters from the observatory. Jack, Emily, Alan, and General Hargrove, along with a security detail, approached the beam cautiously. As they neared, a figure materialized within the light, a humanoid form, but composed entirely of shimmering, translucent light. Dr. Morgan, the figure spoke, its voice clear and oddly melodic. We are the Tarosians, from what you describe as the fifth dimension. We have come to share with you a truth about your existence. Jack stepped forward, his heart pounding. We welcome you and we're ready to listen, though your arrival is quite unsettling to us. The Tarosian's form flickered slightly, as if adjusting itself to be less intimidating. We understand your apprehension. In our dimension, the constructs of time do not bind us. We experience existence in a form you would describe as timeless. Alan, always the skeptic, frowned. Timeless? How can a civilization exist without time? It's fundamental to everything we know. The Tarosian nodded. To you, time is linear, a constant flow. To us, it is a dimension that can be traversed. Your attachment to time is unique and, in our view, a limitation. Emily, curious and ever diplomatic, interjected. Could you show us? If time doesn't bind you, could you demonstrate what that means? With a gesture from the Tarosian, the surroundings changed. The sky shifted rapidly from day to night and back to day. Flowers bloomed and withered in seconds. Yet to Jack and his team, no time seemed to pass. This is a mere illustration, the Tarosian explained. Your minds are interpreting these changes as they can. Were you in our dimension, you would understand more naturally. General Hargrove, ever the protector, was cautious. What do you want with us? Why show us this? The Tarosian looked directly at the general. Humanity stands at a crossroads. Your current path is consumed by conflicts and a destructive adherence to time. We offer a new path, a freedom from these bindings, to evolve beyond these conflicts. Jack considered the Tarosian's words carefully. And if we refuse, what happens then? There will be no compulsion in this choice, the Tarosian assured. But know this, the evolution we offer will change your civilization in ways you cannot yet comprehend. We will leave you now to consider our proposal. We shall return for your decision. With that, the figure faded, and the light retracted up into the spacecraft, leaving Jack and his team in awe and confusion. As they walked back to the observatory, Alan whispered to Jack, Can we really trust them? This could be a threat in disguise. Jack remained pensive. I don't know, Alan. But whatever our decision, it will define the future of humanity. We need to think carefully, weigh all possible outcomes. Emily added, And we'll do it together, every step of the way. Together, they entered the observatory to prepare for the world-changing decisions ahead. Back at Westford Observatory, the team convened with world leaders via secure video conference to discuss the Tarosians' proposition. The room buzzed with tense anticipation as Jack Morgan briefed the assembled officials on the aliens' demonstration and their offer. The Tarosians claim that by abandoning our perception of time, we will evolve beyond our current limitations and conflicts, Jack explained, replaying the video of the rapid day-night cycle and the blooming flowers. Alan Grant chimed in with a note of skepticism. It's an extraordinary claim. They showed us impressive phenomena, but the scientific implications are staggering. We'd be letting go of the very fabric of our reality based on their word. Emily Harris added, Their communication has been transparent so far. They haven't shown any signs of hostility, but the choice they're offering isn't simple. It's existential. General Hargrove, representing military interests, voiced a more pragmatic concern. We need to consider the security implications. If we decline their offer, we must prepare for potential repercussions. Can we defend ourselves if their intentions are not as benevolent as they seem? As the meeting progressed, the leaders debated potential strategies, ranging from diplomatic engagement to preparing defensive measures. Meanwhile, Jack felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He requested a brief recess and stepped outside, seeking a moment of clarity under the night sky. Alan joined him, handing him a steaming cup of coffee. Tough crowd, Alan remarked. Feels like we're on the brink of something monumental or catastrophic. Jack sighed, his breath visible in the cool air. I keep thinking about what the Tarosians said about evolution. What if they're right? What if this is a chance to leap forward, to solve so many of our problems? But at what cost, Jack? Alan questioned. We'd be changing the very essence of what it means to be human. Time shapes our experiences, our memories, our growth. The conversation was interrupted by Emily, who approached them with her phone in hand. There's more, she said, her tone urgent. I've been analyzing the rest of the data from the Tarosian signals. Just before they contacted us, there was a pattern I couldn't decipher at first. It's a countdown. Jack and Alan exchanged a worried glance. A countdown to what? Jack asked. That's just it, Emily replied. It ends in 72 hours. I think it's a deadline for our decision. The implications of her discovery added a new layer of tension to the already high stakes. The trio headed back inside to relay this new information to the world leaders. The conference resumed with renewed urgency. Jack presented Emily's findings, adding, We may only have 3 days to decide how to respond. The Tarosians haven't threatened us outright, but this countdown could imply consequences if we don't agree to their terms. The leaders debated long into the night, with no clear consensus. Each nation had its perspective, shaped by its own culture, history, and priorities. Some argued for accepting the Tarosians' offer, intrigued by the promise of a new stage of human development. Others saw it as a surrender of humanity's control over its destiny. As dawn approached, the group agreed to convene a global summit to discuss the decision collectively. Jack, Alan, and Emily were tasked with preparing an in-depth analysis of all interactions with the Tarosians to present at the summit. Exhausted yet determined, Jack turned to his colleagues. Whatever we decide, we need to be united in this. It's not just about surviving their deadline. It's about deciding the future path of humanity together. With the world watching and the clock ticking down, they began their preparations, knowing that their actions in the next 3 days would echo through history. In the lead-up to the global summit, Jack Morgan and his team worked tirelessly at Westford Observatory to compile every piece of data, every interaction, and every scientific analysis related to the Tarosians. The weight of their responsibility was palpable. Their findings would heavily influence the world's decision on whether to embrace or reject the alien proposition. Jack, Emily, and Alan, joined by a small group of international experts, scrutinized the Tarosian messages and their technological displays. Dr. Lena Petrov, a theoretical physicist from Russia, focused on the implications of a time-free existence. If we consider time as a dimension that can be navigated much like space, the possibilities for science are boundless. But the risks, they are equally significant, she noted during their review session. Dr. Rajiv Mehta, a philosopher from India, questioned the deeper implications of the Tarosians' offer. Time structures not only our science but our very sense of being, our mortality, our memories, our anticipations. Without it, do we not lose a core part of our humanity? As they debated, Jack looked over the global public reaction. News feeds showed protests and rallies. Some groups demanded acceptance of the Tarosian offer, seeing it as a path to utopia, while others feared the loss of humanity's essence. The world was divided, and emotions ran high. The night before the summit, the team gathered in the observatory's main hall, a map of the world displaying live updates of global sentiments projected behind them. Alan broke the tense silence. We can't ignore the public's voice. This decision affects everyone, not just those in power. How do we ensure their fears and hopes are represented tomorrow? Emily responded, her voice steady. We present the facts, the potential benefits, and the risks. We lay out the philosophical and practical implications. This isn't just a scientific or strategic decision. It's a deeply personal one for every human being. The day of the summit arrived. Representatives from every nation were present, either in person or via secure links. The massive conference room was a microcosm of the world outside, tense, hopeful, fearful. Jack was the first to speak. He presented the Tarosian messages, the demonstration of their technology, and the theoretical models of a timeless existence. As he spoke, he could see the mixed reactions of the audience. Fascination, skepticism, worry. When it was Emily's turn, she discussed the communication patterns and the cultural implications. The Tarosians see time as a barrier to our evolution. To them, we're living half-lives, bound by a dimension that they have transcended. But to us, time is more than a measure. It's a narrative that gives meaning to our lives. Alan, supporting both scientific and public concerns, added, Our understanding of time is tied to everything we know about the universe. Changing that isn't like flipping a switch. It's rewriting our entire existence. Are we ready for that? Are we ready to potentially lose everything that makes us, us? The debates that followed were intense and passionate. Leaders argued, scientists theorized, philosophers pondered. Through it all, Jack, Emily, and Alan stood together, a united front amidst the storm of diverging views. As the summit drew to a close, a vote was held. The decision was as monumental as the discussion. Earth would not accept the Tarosian offer. The risks outweighed the potential benefits, and the loss of humanity's temporal essence was deemed too great a price. After the summit, as leaders began to disperse, Jack felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The Tarosians' response to their decision was still unknown. Would they accept it peacefully, or was there a hidden threat behind their offer? "We did what we had to do," Emily said quietly to Jack and Alan as they left the conference room. "Now, we have to be ready for whatever comes next." They returned to Westford Observatory, the site where it all began, to monitor any developments. The world had made its choice, but the story was far from over. The response from the Tarosians arrived sooner than anyone expected. Just hours after the summit concluded, the shimmering structure in orbit pulsed with a new intensity. Jack Morgan, still at Westford Observatory with his colleagues, watched the monitors closely as the alien message came through. "Humanity has chosen," the message began, in the same melodious voice they had heard before. "We respect your decision to retain your temporal existence. However, before we depart, we offer one individual a chance to experience our dimension, to understand what might have been." The room was silent, the weight of the offer hanging heavily in the air. Everyone's eyes eventually turned to Jack. He was the first to make contact, the one who had been most deeply involved from the beginning. Jack felt a mix of honor and apprehension. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity," he said, looking around at his team. "But it's not without risks. What if I can't come back? What if this changes me in ways we can't foresee?" Emily stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "This is your decision, Jack. But remember, this could be a chance to learn something crucial about them, something that could benefit all of humanity." After a long moment of contemplation, Jack nodded. "I'll do it. I need to understand their world, to see firsthand what they meant about time." Preparations were made quickly. The Tarosians instructed Jack on where to stand outside the observatory. A beam of light descended, enveloping him in its glow. His last glance was towards his friends, Alan's encouraging nod and Emily's worried smile. The transition was instantaneous. Jack found himself floating in a vast, infinite expanse where stars and galaxies swirled around him. Time did not seem to flow here. Events from his past, possibilities of the future, all existed simultaneously. He could see his childhood, his years of study, the summit, even moments that had not yet occurred. A Tarosian form appeared beside him, its presence calming. "This is how we exist," it explained. "All moments are one. We see the patterns of the universe, the connections that bind everything. Your life, your world, is part of a grand tapestry." Jack tried to absorb it all, the beauty and complexity overwhelming him. "But how do you find meaning without a before or after, without progress or growth?" "Meaning for us is different," the Tarosian responded. "It does not come from change over time, but from understanding the completeness of existence. We see the harmony in all things." The experience expanded Jack's perception, but he felt a tug at his heart. The love for his family, the joy of discoveries, the sorrow of losses. These were shaped by time, and he realized he could not give them up, not truly. "Can I take this understanding back with me?" Jack asked, the thought of leaving this all-encompassing view saddening, yet necessary. "You will remember," the Tarosian assured him. "Use it to guide your people, to cherish the time you have." With that, Jack felt a pull, a return to the linear world. He reappeared at the observatory, his team rushing to his side. "Jack, are you all right?" Emily asked, her voice full of concern. Jack nodded, still dizzy from the experience. "I'm okay, it was incredible. They live in a reality that we can hardly imagine, but I understand now why they see our attachment to time as a limitation." Alan looked at him intently. "But you're back, and you chose to come back." "Yes," Jack replied, his voice firm. "Because for all its limitations, our time gives life its shape, it gives it meaning. I wouldn't trade a single second of it for eternity." The team listened, fascinated by his account. Jack's experience didn't just end with him, it started a new chapter for humanity. One where the knowledge of what could be would forever alter their appreciation of what is. The aftermath of Jack's return from the Tarosian dimension was anything but peaceful. Though his insights provided clarity about the alien race and their perception of time, the world was far from reassured. The Tarosians' final communication had promised to respect humanity's decision, but it soon became apparent that their influence was not leaving Earth without a lasting impact. Within days, strange phenomena began occurring around the globe. Time itself seemed to be unraveling. In some regions, people reported living through the same moments repeatedly, caught in an endless loop. In others, days would pass in what felt like minutes, the sun racing across the sky as if on fast forward. Panic spread as the world realized that these were not isolated incidents, but the beginning of something far more terrifying. Jack Morgan, Emily Harris, Alan Grant, and their team were called back to action, this time under the direct supervision of an emergency global task force established to deal with the crisis. The situation was rapidly spiraling out of control. "We've detected temporal anomalies in over 50 countries," General Hargrove reported grimly during a hastily convened briefing. "Entire cities are experiencing disruptions. If this continues, our civilization could collapse." Jack, still processing the alien knowledge he had gained, was at a loss. The Tarosians claimed they would respect our decision, but this is something else. Maybe it's a consequence of their presence here, a ripple effect of their dimension interacting with ours. Emily, scanning the data, nodded. "The anomalies aren't random. They're increasing in frequency and intensity. It's as if their dimension is bleeding into ours, and our reality is struggling to cope." Alan, who had been silent until now, spoke up with uncharacteristic urgency. "We need to stop this. Whatever the Tarosians are doing, we have to find a way to isolate our dimension, to stop their influence from tearing us apart." The team, along with a global coalition of scientists and military experts, began working around the clock. Their goal was to understand the nature of the temporal distortions and find a way to counteract them. Jack knew that they were racing against time, literally and figuratively. As the days passed, the situation grew more desperate. Entire nations were plunged into chaos as time fractured in unpredictable ways. Communications became increasingly difficult as different regions experienced time at different rates. It was as if the very fabric of reality was disintegrating. In the midst of this crisis, Jack had a breakthrough. Drawing on his experience in the Tarosian dimension, he theorized that the anomalies were the result of a destabilization of Earth's temporal field caused by the Tarosians' technology. If they could somehow stabilize this field, they might be able to prevent further damage. "We need to create a counter-frequency," Jack explained during a tense strategy meeting. "Something that can reinforce the natural flow of time on Earth. If we can generate a signal that counteracts the Tarosian influence, we might be able to stop these anomalies." General Hargrove, ever pragmatic, asked the hard question. "And how do we generate this counter-frequency? We don't have anything that operates on the same level as their technology." Emily, who had been thinking along the same lines, chimed in. "We could use the Tarosian ship itself. If we can hack into their systems, we might be able to use their own technology against them." The plan was audacious, but it was their only hope. The team quickly set to work, utilizing every resource at their disposal to decode the Tarosian technology. Time was running out, ironically in more ways than one. Finally, after days of relentless effort, they were ready. Jack and Emily, along with a small team of engineers, boarded a hastily prepared shuttle and launched toward the Tarosian ship. The world watched anxiously as they approached the alien structure, which still hovered silently in orbit. Inside the ship, the atmosphere was surreal. The interior was a vast, ever-shifting landscape of light and geometry, reflecting the Tarosians' non-linear existence. Guided by the knowledge Jack had gained during his time in the fifth dimension, they navigated the ship's systems, searching for a way to access its core. "Here," Jack said, stopping at a control panel that seemed to pulse with energy. "This is the heart of their temporal technology. If we can inject our counter-frequency here, it should stabilize the anomalies." Working together, Jack and Emily synchronized their equipment with the alien technology. The process was complex, requiring precise calculations and perfect timing. Ironically, things that had become increasingly difficult as the temporal distortions worsened. "Ready?" Emily asked, her voice tense. Jack took a deep breath and nodded. Do it. Emily activated the counter frequency. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ship began to hum with a low, resonant tone. The light around them pulsed rhythmically, and Jack felt a strange sensation, as if the world was realigning itself. On Earth, the effects were immediate. The temporal anomalies began to recede, time stabilizing across the globe. The chaotic loops and rapid accelerations faded away, and a fragile sense of normalcy began to return. Back on the Terosian ship, Jack and Emily watched as the control panel's light dimmed, the energy dissipating. "We did it," Jack said, relief flooding through him. But as they prepared to leave, a final message from the Terosians echoed through the ship. "You have chosen your path, and we respect your decision. But know this. The universe is vast, and your understanding of time is but a small part of its mysteries. We will depart, but our influence remains. Use your time wisely." The message left Jack with a sense of unease, but there was no time to dwell on it. The shuttle returned to Earth, where the world was beginning to recover from the brink of disaster. As they landed, Jack, Emily, and their team were greeted as heroes. But Jack couldn't shake the feeling that the Terosians' departure was not the end of the story. The crisis had been averted, but the encounter had changed humanity in ways that would take years, if not centuries, to fully understand. For now, though, they had bought themselves time, precious, fleeting time, to continue their journey, wherever it might lead. The stabilization of time brought a collective sigh of relief to the world, but the respite was short-lived. As the temporal anomalies receded, another, more insidious threat began to emerge. The Terosians' departure had left behind subtle, lingering disruptions. Ripples in reality that hinted at deeper, unresolved issues. Strange events began to occur. Localized but intense. People would suddenly experience their entire lives in the span of a few minutes, or entire blocks of time would vanish from their memories, leaving them disoriented and confused. Jack Morgan, Emily Harris, Alan Grant, and the rest of their team were back at Westford Observatory, working tirelessly to understand these new phenomena. The world's governments were on high alert, but this time the threat was less tangible. It wasn't a direct assault, but a slow, creeping corruption of the fabric of reality itself. "We thought we stabilized the situation, but these disruptions, they're like fractures in a dam we've only just patched," Alan said, his face drawn with fatigue as he stared at the data scrolling across his monitor. Emily was deep in thought, her brow furrowed as she examined the readings. The Terosians warned us that their influence would remain even after they left. These anomalies might be the result of that lingering presence, like echoes of their technology still reverberating through our dimension. Jack, who had been silent, finally spoke. "It's more than just echoes. It's as if the very concept of time is unraveling. The Terosians tried to show us that time doesn't exist in the way we understand it. But by interacting with us, they've destabilized our reality. We need to address this at its core, or we risk everything." General Hargrove, who had been monitoring the situation from the military's command center, contacted them with a grim update. "We've identified hotspots where these disruptions are most severe. They seem to be spreading from key locations, places where the temporal anomalies were strongest during the crisis. If this continues unchecked, we could see entire cities lost to these distortions." The gravity of the situation hit Jack and his team hard. They realized that their previous efforts, while heroic, had only been a temporary fix. Now they had to face the reality that the only way to save humanity might be to confront the very source of these disruptions, a task that seemed almost impossible. "We need to go back into the Terosian ship," Jack said decisively, breaking the heavy silence that had settled over the group. "If there's any chance of stopping this, it's going to be in understanding how their technology is still affecting us. We have to find a way to sever whatever connection is still lingering." Emily nodded, though her expression was one of concern. "But the ship is dormant now, after what we did. It's possible that without the Terosians, there won't be any way to access the systems we need." "We don't have a choice," Alan said, backing up Jack. "If we don't at least try, we're just waiting for things to get worse. This is our fight, and we have to finish it." The team prepared for what could be their final mission. The world's eyes were on them once again, but this time there was an added layer of desperation. The shuttle was outfitted with every piece of technology and weaponry that might help them in the unknown environment they were heading into, though no one was sure what they would face. As they approached the Terosian ship, it still hung in orbit, its once bright and pulsating structure now dark and cold. It looked less like a ship and more like a tomb, silent and foreboding. Inside, the team found the environment even more unstable than before. The shifting geometries and light patterns had become erratic, reflecting the turmoil in the temporal fabric. Navigating through the alien corridors, Jack and Emily led the way, their senses heightened by the tension of the unknown. "We need to reach the core again," Jack instructed, his voice steady despite the mounting anxiety. "That's where we'll find the source of these disruptions." They moved deeper into the ship, and as they did, the environment around them began to warp and twist in increasingly strange ways. At times, they found themselves in the same hallway they had just walked through, as if the ship were folding in on itself. At others, they glimpsed moments from the past, themselves entering the ship, Jack's first contact with the Tarosians, even moments from their own childhoods. It was as if the ship was playing back the timeline of their lives in a chaotic, fragmented manner. Finally, they reached the core chamber. The massive control panel that had once pulsed with energy was now a chaotic swirl of lights and sounds. It was clear that whatever stability they had managed to impose before was rapidly deteriorating. "We need to inject a countermeasure directly into the system," Jack said, quickly unpacking the device they had brought. "This is based on what we learned from our previous encounter. If we can send a signal strong enough, it might just reset the ship's influence on our dimension." Emily and Alan worked quickly, setting up the device and calibrating it to match the Tarosian technology. The lights around them flickered erratically, and the air seemed to hum with the weight of time itself. "Ready?" Jack asked, his hand hovering over the activation button. Emily and Alan exchanged a glance, then nodded. "Do it." Jack pressed the button, and the device sprang to life, emitting a low-frequency hum that resonated with the core. The lights around them flashed wildly, and for a moment it felt as though the entire ship would tear itself apart. But then, slowly, the chaos began to subside. The lights dimmed to a steady glow, and the twisting geometries around them stabilized. The device had worked, at least partially, enough to calm the worst of the disruptions. "We did it," Emily whispered, her voice filled with cautious relief. "But for how long?" As the team prepared to leave, the ship emitted one final message, this time more subdued, almost as if it were an afterthought from the Tarosians. "You have chosen to preserve your time, your reality. But time is fragile. Remember this lesson as you move forward." The shuttle returned to Earth, where the temporal anomalies had ceased. The world, though shaken and scarred by the experience, began to heal. But the team knew that the threat of the Tarosians, or others like them, was not gone. It had simply been postponed. Jack, Emily, Alan, and the rest of their team were hailed as heroes, but they felt no triumph. The battle for humanity had been won, but the war for its future was far from over. As they looked up at the sky, now clear and stable, they knew that the lessons of this encounter would guide them for the rest of their lives, and perhaps for the rest of humanity's time. The world had narrowly escaped disaster, but the aftershocks of the Tarosians' visit lingered in the hearts and minds of every human being. As Jack Morgan and his team returned to Earth, they were greeted with both celebration and unease. The global community hailed them as saviors, but the experience had left them all profoundly changed. The sky above was clear, the temporal anomalies had ceased, and time seemed to flow as it once had. Yet a deep understanding lingered that the world was not the same place it had been before the Tarosians arrived. In the days following their return, Jack found himself struggling to return to the normalcy of his former life. The Westford Observatory, once a place of quiet research, had become a hub of international attention. Reporters, scientists, and government officials swarmed the facility, seeking answers, guidance, and reassurances that the crisis was truly over. Jack, Emily Harris, and Alan Grant convened in the observatory's conference room, where the events of the past few weeks were still fresh in their minds. The room was filled with a somber atmosphere as they reflected on what had transpired. "It's hard to believe it's really over," Alan said, his voice tinged with exhaustion. "But even if the immediate threat is gone, the questions they left us with, they're going to haunt us for a long time." Emily nodded, her expression thoughtful. "The Tarosians gave us a glimpse into a reality we can barely comprehend. Their parting message was clear. Our understanding of time, our reality, is fragile, and it's something we have to protect." Jack, who had been staring out the window at the setting sun, finally spoke. "We may have stopped the immediate crisis, but the world has changed. People are scared. uncertain about what comes next. They look to us for answers, but the truth is, we're just as unsure as they are. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the weight of their collective experiences. The crisis had pushed them to their limits, and though they had succeeded in preventing disaster, it had come at a cost. Each of them had been forced to confront the limitations of human knowledge and the fragility of their understanding of the universe. As the world slowly returned to its daily routines, Jack and his team were left to pick up the pieces. They continued their work at the observatory, but their focus shifted. They were no longer just scientists. They had become guardians of a deeper truth, aware that the mysteries of the universe held dangers as well as wonders. One evening, after another long day of research and debriefings, Jack found himself alone in the observatory's main telescope room. The vast dome above him was open to the night sky, the stars twinkling serenely as if nothing had happened. He adjusted the telescope's lens, pointing it toward a distant star cluster, his mind wandering. Emily entered quietly, joining him by the telescope. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Jack shook his head. "No, too much on my mind. It feels like we've been given a second chance, but I keep wondering, what if something like this happens again? What if there are other beings out there, ones who don't respect our choice?" Emily sighed, leaning against the railing beside him. "We can't live in fear of the unknown, Jack, but we can be prepared. The world has learned a lot from this experience, about ourselves, our limitations, and our potential. We've proven that we can face the unimaginable and survive." Jack looked at her, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I suppose you're right. We've come through this together, and we'll face whatever comes next the same way." They stood there in silence for a while, gazing up at the stars. The night was peaceful, the calm after the storm, but the lessons they had learned were etched into their consciousness. Lessons about time, reality, and the human spirit's capacity to endure. In the following weeks, life gradually returned to a new normal. The global community began to rebuild, not just physically, but philosophically. The encounter with the Tarosians had sparked a worldwide dialogue about the nature of existence, time, and what it meant to be human. Philosophers, scientists, and theologians engaged in debates and discussions that would shape the future of humanity's understanding of the universe. Jack, Emily, and Alan became central figures in these discussions, sharing their experiences and insights with the world. They worked closely with international organizations to develop new protocols for potential future encounters with extraterrestrial beings. The world had been shaken, but it had also been united by the experience, and the sense of shared purpose was palpable. One day, as they were wrapping up another session at the observatory, Alan turned to Jack and Emily with a thoughtful expression. "You know, we've spent so much time worrying about what could have happened, what might still happen. But I think it's time we start focusing on what we can do now, with what we've learned." Jack raised an eyebrow. "What do you have in mind, Alan?" Alan smiled, a rare expression of lightness on his usually serious face. "I'm thinking we should take what we've learned and use it to push the boundaries of our understanding. Not just in response to a crisis, but proactively. Let's explore, let's innovate. Let's use this knowledge to better ourselves and our world." Emily nodded in agreement. "We've been given a rare gift, a chance to see the universe in a new light. It's up to us to make sure we don't squander that opportunity." Jack looked at his friends, feeling a sense of renewed purpose. "You're right. We've faced down the unimaginable and come through stronger. Now it's time to look forward, to use what we've learned to build a better future." The three of them stood together, gazing out at the vast sky above. The Tarosians had come and gone, leaving humanity with more questions than answers, but also with a new understanding of their place in the universe. The world had changed, and so had they. As they walked out of the observatory, the dawn was breaking on the horizon. The first light of the new day bathed the landscape in a warm glow, symbolizing not just the end of a dark chapter, but the beginning of something new. An era where humanity would move forward, guided by the lessons of the past and the promise of the future.